Welcome to Emtron Training Part 14. In this tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at the different types of fuel injection strategies we have to work with. And we're also going to be taking a look at setting up the injector driver type specific to the injectors that we're dealing with. So this is going to be accounting for things like our saturated or a peak and hold driver, and then learning how to properly program the peak and hold driver ratio and the amperage setup so that we're controlling a low impedance injector properly. We have a lot of things to cover. Let's jump into our tutorial so we can check this out. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at working with our injection mode programming within our Emtron, also accounting for what type of fuel injectors we're having installed in our fuel system, whether the injectors are saturated style or they're low impedance style. We need to go and select the correct driver type from the Emtron injector driver option in order to control the injector properly. And there's some more details associated with that. We're going to take a look at that a little bit later in the video. The beginning of the video here, we're going to be talking about our different injection modes. Let's go and take a look at where we can find this programming information, and then we'll discuss it. So we're going to move here from our tuning window into config, and then from config, we're going to go here to fuel and then fuel main. Now under fuel main, we find our option here, injection mode. This is now set to the sequential option. If we take a look on our right side of our screen, we're going to find we have our various numbers that we can select within our injection modes, and these are going to be designating the different types of injection modes we can run with our Emtron. Now a value of 0 is off, meaning we want to shut off the injectors. This is a good option if you're trying to go in and do some kind of a diagnostic or troubleshooting capability with your Emtron, and you don't want the injectors to fire. Maybe you want to crank over the engine to be able to check timing, for example. You'd want to go here and turn off the injectors and select a value of 0. That'll disable the injectors. We don't have to worry about them coming on. The next option we find here are value of 1, which is sequential, which is what I have my Emtron selected on here. This is going to be firing the injectors within the firing order of the engine, and it's going to be firing one injector per cylinder once in the auto cycle. And it's specifically going to be able to time the injection event because we have a sync or a home position sensor, typically found on our camshaft, and that's going to allow the Emtron to decipher where the number one top dead cylinder position is going to be, and from there it can run calculations in terms of the degrees of engine rotation to be able to select where we want that injector to spray. So not only are we going in and we having one injector per injector driver and we're spraying that injector once per auto cycle, we're being very specific of where that injector is actually sprayed. That gives us a lot of advantages because we can get better fuel economy, we can get better power by going in and selecting the sequential option. Now I do want to mention at this point when we're talking about sequential injection, we will find above 4,000 or 5,000 RPM, the sequential option doesn't matter as much, so we're going to be looking down here below non-sequential. That's going to be firing the injectors in a non-sequential format. We'll talk about that. But in the non-sequential format, the injectors might be fired twice per cylinder and per cycle, depending on how we have things wired. In that situation, we're going to get the fuel into the engine one way or another, because at high engine speeds, the engine cycle time exponentially starts to drop, or the amount of time it takes to complete an auto cycle. So at idle, it's 120 milliseconds. At 9,000 RPM, that's about 13 milliseconds. So we can see it's a drastic difference in the amount of time available to complete one auto cycle. And as a result, as we get to high engine speeds, we're going to be essentially spraying the fuel into the engine pretty large amounts, and the amount of time we're going to be spraying the injector for. If we're finding the engine cycle time at something like 5,000 RPM, let's say it takes 20 milliseconds, and our injector pulse width is 15 milliseconds, well, our injector is going to be open and spraying fuel for essentially the entire auto cycle. In that situation, timing the injection event is not going to matter really at all, and we'll find if we're looking at low engine speeds where the engine cycle time is relatively high, we have a lot more time to spray the fuel and be more specific with it. So the sequential will really matter more for low engine speeds, where the engine cycle time is a lot longer and we have a bit more control over where we want that fuel to be injected into the engine. So looking at this and talking about this, sequential is the ideal way for the best economy and the best power at lower engine speeds. Typically below 4,000 RPM, it makes the most difference. Okay, so then the second option we have here, the actual third option, or the number 2 option though, sequential, staged sequential. By selecting this option, this tells the Emtron that we have both a primary set of injectors and a secondary set of injectors. So in this orientation or configuration here,
Our primary set of injectors will spray at idle and part throttle cruise situations.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.